So hello, and welcome to another conversation. Amber, tell me about today.
Yeah, today's a good day, Martin. Sun is in the sky. The sky's blue. It's summer. It's not super hot. It's kind of one of those days. Pretty nice.
That's awesome. And you're actually helping setting me up, as you often do.
Well, I don't know what I'm setting up for, so I just go with what I'm.
Well, today I'd like to talk about the word wellness. Now, I was in a wellness seminar last week, and it had different elements about personal wellness, but projects also have a wellness to them and have some essentials that need to be covered. And I thought it'd be great if we could have a conversation today about one, how those things intersect, personal and professional, and what are some of the elements that people may or may not be considering for project wellness.
Mm. First thing that comes to mind is value delivery. And, we talk a lot in projects about the triple constraints, which is time, cost, and scope. And they're very important. In fact, they are the trinity of project success. But the problem is that it's actually a very conservative or very traditional approach to measuring success on a project. Because within scope, time, and cost, these metrics don't take into consideration the intangible value and the relationships, the collaboration, the innovation, the entrepreneur or entrepreneurship that is a part of becoming or managing a project. So you're working on a project team, whether you're the manager or whether it doesn't matter, in vicinity to having a hand in project work. Measuring success is not as simple as just three metrics. And I think at this stage of the world, with the complexity that we are experiencing, this ability to recognize there's more going on a project than just, did we spend the right amount of money? Did we do it in a timely fashion? Did we do what we said we were going to do? Those three things are very important, but they're not the full picture. And I would argue that wellness in a human's life and their experience is similar. Our culture puts pretty clear metrics around how to measure whether you're having a successful life or not. But it's also always in comparison to others. And the comparison to others doesn't take into consideration the uniqueness of you. So what does it mean for you, Martin, to experience wellness in your home life, in your personal life, that is greatly affected and impacted by your professional career, actually is also separate? Or you're not separate from it, but the way you measure success should be a different measure.
Yeah.
And who gets to determine that? If I determined what success looked like for you in your personal life, I would do it differently than the way you do it. That doesn't make my way better. It's just my way of viewing personal success is going to be different than yours. We're both right, even if there is a right, right? Because subjectively, what's right and what's wrong? The older I get, the less I know about that. So I think wellness it's a good question to have, but don't expect answers from me because I don't think there are hard and fast answers. I think the triple constraints makes us feel good about, yay, we can measure it and it's good. In reality, it's never enough of the full scope, literally, of whether this project had a positive impact or whether the project itself, even in its failure, led us and led our interest holders to a place where we all can benefit from the experience. And that could be seen as a failure that actually also informs future successes. And so I think we got to think big picture when we measure those things.
And I like how you're talking about the measurements of them, because you're absolutely right. Something can come on time, in scope, in budget, and yet be a total catastrophe. And what do I mean by that? And you've hit a couple of those spots in there, like relationship. If the interest holder doesn't feel value and they're never coming back, or worse yet, they're even saying, like, that was a horrible experience. Yeah, you met the triple constraint, but relationship is damaged. And on the flip side of that, that's the interest holder side. The project pulled everything together. We did it great. And the entire team's like, we're all going to go to the ER now for cardiac because we just pushed ourselves way too hard. You don't have the ability to do that again. And so you brought back, and I love that. In coaching, when I first started, we were talking about ROI, return on investment, but now we use ROE, return on engagement. And that's exactly where you were going with that last piece, which is what is this engagement about and what do we measure as success? And I like how you said there's not going to be questions not going to be answers. Coaches always come back to questions. What are some questions you think might be useful in looking at some of these wellness measures to make sure that we're not just holding the big three up, that we're holding the various pieces?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting you chose the word wellness because I think it's a really popular word right now to explain what we're articulating. But once again, it proposes that there is a lack of wellness or there is unwellness. And once again, I just think there's subjectiveness to this. My context, my life, my circumstance, the decisions that I make are actually based on my life experience, my, personal biases, my perceptual filters. Those are all unique to me, which means that when I choose something that I would consider to be a wellness choice for me, that very same choice could be unwell for someone else. And this doesn't fly very well particularly in, I would say, a North American business culture, because we are all about deciding for others what's good or bad. And we've capitalized on that and we profitize on making decisions about what's going to be good or bad for people. And we want, to take advantage or economize it. And I think, this is a challenge. Like I, we've been encouraged to be individuals and to feel incredibly powerful in our individualism. And that's been, I think, culturally an expectation, even in project management. I think what I recognize with the career path, even 20 years ago, 25 years ago, to be the project manager. Oh, that was the goal. I don't even believe that. In fact, when I teach project management, I'm not teaching project managers. That's not interesting enough to me because it's not helpful to keep idolizing a role that is just simply one of the roles on a project that, yes, has a very important role to play, but it is not the way a project gets done. You don't just have a really good single individual that project manages it to success. That actually never happens. And I would challenge any of you listening to me, give me an example of when one person can derive a product, service, or result to full project closure with success all by themselves. It just simply can't happen. So fast forward 25 years to now, and project management and understanding project management as a career path, but certainly as a work path, professional path, there are so many different roles to perform. Project manager is just one of them. So when I'm teaching, I always talk about project team. We're on the team. Your role on the team is very different than mine. I might be the project manager in title, but that doesn't also mean that there are roles within the project work that I bow to you and your subject matter expertise. I'm not managing you. I'm hoping to manage the aspects of the project and the plan, but I'm doing that in service to the team members, the interest holders, and to what they contribute and bring to the table. That's what doesn't get well measured when we look at the triple constraints. Because when you put that threesome, that Trinity filter on it, you're always like, well, is that going to cost us? Or how much time is that going to be? Or is that what we said we were going to do? When in reality, when you step back and go, like, I don't have the same gifts and skills as my project team member here, I'm going to allow them very much and empower them to lead this aspect because they have gifts and skills that I don't have. That's a huge win. At an emotional level, what's going on there, that collaboration, that idea that we are not going to be in competition with one another. We are going to support and serve one another. And as a result, that's going to allow for us to be set free in the ways that we can bring awesome work. That's not a metric. It doesn't even fit in the triple constraints. I mean, yes, ideally it should save us time and it should save us money. But even if it costs us more money, is that not important? I was doing a risk analysis fairly recently. We were just thinking of all of the, environmental risks in this one project. And yeah, like if we chose to make decisions, we could save money. But what's the environmental impact to that? And what's the sweet spot? How do you balance out, well, we can't do this because that's going to be bad for the environment in the environment or in that project that I'm working on. But also we have to do something because this is something we have to kind of have as a part of the overall project plan. So what level of it? How do we spend more money because it has more benefit to the environment? Is that what's in project scope for this project? Because, what did we put in the charter? What did we determine project scope was? Do we care about the environment? Well, arguably, every individual professional, yeah, we should. Absolutely. We're called to do that. That's part of the duty and the responsibility of recognizing that the work we do has broader impact than just for us and the team and the interest holders in our little, section of the world. However, how does one determine that? And what level of success metric can you put on? There's so much going on here. There's so much complexity. And I think specific to the term wellness that you talk about, it is inappropriate for me to determine whether someone else is well or not based on how they show up on the project or what they say to me, because that person has every right to disclose or keep private what their own experience is. I'm getting poorer and poorer at masking myself. I had a conversation with someone yesterday and I just met them and I just sort of was very boldly explaining to them a circumstance that I'm dealing with. And I could see the look on their face like, wow, like, why are you telling me this level of intensity? Like, I don't even know you. And I'm like, oh, right. Sorry, I don't mask anymore. I'm sort of at that stage where if you ask the right question towards me, you're going to just get my full, truthful answer. And if that's too much for you, I'm sorry. But my wellness journey is about me not masking to people. That's a really important component of how I've tried to come to terms with genuine wellness for Amber. And that's my unique journey. That's not something that I can expect from others. And that person didn't disclose back to me with the same transparency, nor was I expecting it. But I think social cues would have told us that, well, they should say something and then I should say something and we should go back and forth. And I was like, no, it's also okay for you to just not continue. We didn't have to have the conversation. And we didn't have to become closer. I just wasn't interested in creating more complexity in my life. I often give the example to students when I'm talking about project management. I always say, like, the best thing you can do in your project is tell the truth 100% of the time, because the truth is really hard, but the truth reduces complexity, which means that you don't create new mini projects for yourself, because every little thing you don't tell the full truth about, you actually start a new project. And that project is, so in addition to the main project that I'm running, I now have to create a new project plan to superimpose on top of it that adjusts the facts at all times to make sure that mistruth that I told is maintained all the way through. I'm like, that's at my stage and age in my career. That's what I can't do. I used to do it all the time. And that took away my wellness. It took away, arguably, the wellness of the projects that I was leading, but it certainly robbed me personally of wellness. So I think that juxtaposition has been something just personally that I really have had to work towards having a different perspective. What about you? You and I talk about wellness as friends, but in a work environment, what's the metric? What metrics are missing from the triple constraints to use them? Can we even clearly define them?
Sure, great. I do want to acknowledge, first off, thank you for that share, because that was really, really powerful. And I just want to break that down into two pieces before I go into your question. So the first one was Thank you for your share on radical candor, because radical candor is important. That truth, that trustworthiness is part of. It's not in time. I can't measure radical candor and trustworthiness in time, cost, and scope, but it's essential. It's essential on the other side, the relationship side. So let's always remember that's super valuable, and there's a huge amount of metric that can be gained in that trust. When I heard you talking, though, about the interconnectedness of the teams and the charters, I'll tell you what came to mind for me was the word your network's culture. Because on the one hand is the result, right? Time, scope, cost, that's going to give you your result. But the culture is going to get you the product capability. How did we get there? What was the journey along the way? Because, yeah, you can't, radical candor is a thing that can be measured inside that journey of production capability. And can we continue to be capable? And how do we keep production happening? And it reminded me, so before I go to your question, I want to come back to a conversation you and I had maybe a month ago about the driver versus the pit crew on the racetrack. And for our listeners, we were in a racing themed restaurant, and Amber disclosed that she's a big race fan, which somehow in 15 years I've never heard. Okay, gotta be exact. But we talked about the beauty of the pit crew, which is a little of what we're talking about in terms of, because that's the wellness of the car. That's the project of the car. Well, who's getting the driver's getting U1 times go, but the pit crew can't get there without the pit crew. And so I'm balancing it back, if you will, based on that conversation.
That's exactly right. And that's why I think in this day and age, from here on out, we need to stop honoring and valuing and hierarchying. That's not a word, but I made it up. The project manager, as though this role is, it isn't. Project manager is just one person. Just one person. I was talking yesterday to someone on a board of directors, and they were saying, well, they're the president of the board. And I'm like, great, but you're still just one vote. You're just one person. Well, no, that's the way it works. That does not mean your role isn't incredibly important. But, in that case, I was saying, coaching the individual, your role is service to everyone else on the team. It's not actually for you to get done what you want. And this is a popular misconception about leadership, popular misconception about project manager, is that a project manager determines how the project's going to run. Oh, you can try, but is in reality, like I said a few times, even in this few minutes, projects are not done on an island. It's not one individual. It takes teams and groups of people to create something out of nothing, or to innovate something out of something into something new. So, yeah. And the pit crew and that's the other thing I think. This is why I love Agile. I love Agile project management, and I love the Agile manifesto and that philosophy, because right from its inception, it increased the value of relationship with interest holders. It substantiated from the beginning that if you are in a close working collaborative relationship with the interest holders on your project, and you are doing project work in short bursts of planning and then managing and actioning the work, what you have is this ability to action very quickly, changes, adjustments. You have the ability to manage quality in the immediate, and your interest holders know the entire time with full transparency what's what, which means scope even can ebb and flow a little bit, but it is in transparency that happens. And, in kind of traditional or waterfall project management, that wasn't necessarily how we found our way into this profession. It was very much setting these terms up, and we defined scope very clearly so that then we have a metric we can measure. But an agile approach automatically enabled relationship to be valued, and that changed that. It put the pit crew and the driver all on the podium at the end, and I appreciate that, because I think that model is actually far more true. And that honors collective wellness. It's not just that the project was successful, it's that every individual on the project, both the trying times and the not so trying times, ultimately experiences success the same way at the end, because there was nothing disclosed, or excuse me, there was nothing held back all the way along. They were a part of it. They understood it. They took responsibility for all the adjustments and changes and, the work ebbing and flowing. And so at the end, it's not like, oh, what a miracle we got here. It's no, we did this together. We collectively got to this end result. That helps everyone feel better and be more well. You still didn't answer my question.
Can you read it back to me, the question?
Do you think there are other metrics we could add to the triple constraints? Do you think we could define what those are?
Yeah, the presentation I was attending, so I'm just going to use the material from the presentation that I was attending, talked about 6 different types of wellness. And they were for individuals, but they talked about wellness of body. Am I healthy? Am I fit? Wellness of mind. Am I cognitively able to create and think of things differently, analytically, memory? Am I well in my emotions, in my healthy expression of what I'm feeling? Am I well in my spirit? In other words, defined here as purpose or drive, the reason I get out of bed in the morning, my meaning. Am I well in economics? So how am I looking at my personal space of wealth compared to what it is I'm desiring in the world? And finally, it was social. How am I doing in terms of my community and those around me? And those are the 6 metrics that particular wellness group was looking at. And for me, when I think about that, projects have all of those and individuals have all of those. And so I've been thinking a lot about all 6 of those as I go through my leadership in my day every day now. Am I over indexing on relationship? Am I under indexing on purpose? Where do I really need to hit this? Where do I need to make sure that we're good? Are we fit in terms of everybody's at work and needs to be, and that we've got every key position filled? Because I'll call it the body of work, but like take 1 or 2 key individuals out of a project, and all of a sudden you come to see exactly what your risk is when you lose 1 or 2 key individuals. And health can do that.
And well, it does, right? I mean, it does actually, even more so, I think. Even in the last 5 years, I've seen this and part of it too, Martin, is we didn't approach health in the workplace the same way 5 years ago that we do now. Full disclosure, and I'm the first one to admit, I worked sick my entire career. And it wasn't because I was thinking about how I could inoculate others to be sick like me. That was the last thing on my mind. What was always at the forefront of my mind was, I'll just suck it up and work through it. That was simply the culture and the expectation I put on myself. And I would say, I'm not suggesting that all the employers I had expected that of me. I didn't give them a choice. I just did it anyway. I hid it or created an environment where I could get away with it. And then when we had a global pandemic, I think what I also got educated on, in addition to a lot of us, was, that's a metric that costs too much. And I started to imagine the math on how many times I had worked sick and likely made others sick previous to the global pandemic. And I looked at that and recognized, actually, I ended up costing my projects, my work environment so much, but I never thought of it that way. I had insulated and made it about me. And I had never really thought about making it about everybody, about the team, about the pit crew. And as soon as I did that, and was quite ultimately forced to do that because of the global pandemic, I realize now I wouldn't work sick the same way. Because that actually equates to a wellness point that I now understand differently. And I really believe that this overworking feeling, this working ourselves to the ground and then somehow being praised for that, I'm the first person to get the accolades for overworking. And I realize that's fed my ego. And that's the wrong food for my ego. And I don't want that to be the case anymore. And I think we need to change that, because as a metric of success, it has meant that projects have made scope, time, and cost. But
Yeah, and I loved that thing you just said. I mean, if there's one giant takeaway from this one is I will not work sick again. And that's an important message to put out to not just individuals, to team leads.
because I'm still tempted to, right? Like, I'm not saying this is an easy thing,
That's right.
but yeah, let's start saying it to each other and help each other.
All right. So let's keep each other accountable for that as we move on to our next conversation. Okay. Thank you so much for everything today. Have a great day.